What's up, guys? Venomous here, and I got a new OTGT for you. This time I'm talking about the game Lost Odyssey. Now, in case any of you guys don't know what that game is, Lost Odyssey is a Japanese RPG. It's a next-gen version of a Japanese RPG for the Xbox 360. This is one of the first. This is one of the first really big RPGs that came out back in the day when the Xbox 360 was still an up-and-coming system. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this game, I know it's old, it's been around for quite a while, but I recently just picked it up and I had some time to spend, on playing it. But here's what I really want to stress to you guys. This is an RPG that could really withstand the test of time. And the reason why I say that is because this RPG, granted it doesn't have some of the best graphics or gameplay elements, in contrast to a lot of the other RPGs that are coming out now in more recent times. The reason why this is so good is because this really feels like an old school Japanese RPG on a next gen console. A next gen JRPG is what I really want to stress out. This RPG, in my opinion, Lost Odyssey it's a lot better than something like Final Fantasy 13, which we all know is a more contemporary Japanese RPG. It's Final Fantasy, it's been around for a while, but this game really could stand its ground against something like Final Fantasy 13. I don't know, maybe about a bunch of other RPGs, because more RPGs now that are coming out in more recent times are starting to become more westernized and much more modern. Like, for example, Mass Effect 2, Fallout 3, or Fallout New Vegas. Games like that. They're radically different than the old school style of Japanese RPGs, which are much more attuned to like Chrono Trigger or some of the original Final Fantasies, like including Final Fantasy 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Even Dragon Quest 9, or Dragon Quest in general, I should say. The reason why Lost Odyssey is so good, okay, because number one, the same people that did Final Fantasy X, which includes Sakaguchi, which is the creator of Final Fantasy, and the guy who does the music for Final Fantasy, for most of them anyways, Nobuo Uematsu. These are the same two guys that did Final Fantasy X, and they came to work on this game, and they actually created it. And you could see a lot of the similarities between the two works. This Lost Odyssey almost feels like the spiritual successor to Final Fantasy X. And what's really interesting is because you look at something like Final Fantasy X, and then you look at where the series went from 12 and to from 10 all the way up to 12 and 13. You could really see the big changes that have been made because of the actual franchise changing hands and going on to other people to work within their company. What makes this really good is because Lost Odyssey really takes all the classic elements and the key basic elements to a Japanese RPG, keeps them there, expands upon them, and actually makes it look a lot more prettier than what it's ever been before. Because if you actually go into some of the battles in Lost Odyssey and you really look at the turn-based battle system and everything, yes, it's the same basic stuff we've seen for probably the past decade or so, but on top of it's the being so familiar in the gameplay elements, the actual cinematics and the epic look or the cinematic look of each one of the attacks or actions that you make your character do in relation to the enemies are amazing. You could send your character, for example, the main character in the very beginning of the game, when you're actually fighting some of the enemies that are coming at you, you're just inputting a simple attack command, but then it gets all cinematic and crazy looking, and really it looks almost kind of like an interactive movie with all these crazy attacks and stuff that he's doing, and all you're doing is just hitting the attack command, and it's looking really, really epic from that. And the game obviously gets a lot more crazier from there, but I'm not going to spoil anything. But what's really good and what's really makes a Japanese RPG, that's always been the case in pretty much for almost every RPG out there, is a really good story. Now, a lot of people complain about the stories both in Final Fantasy 12 and Final Fantasy 13. And, for that particular type of story, it's whatever your taste is, it's either you're going to like it or hate it. What makes this game, Lost Odyssey, so good is that it has a really compelling and engaging and engrossing story. What I mean by that is on top of the main story of what you play through between, all 4 discs that you go through the entire game, there's these little kind of dreams. They're called 1,000 years of dreams, which are pretty much events that are triggered by certain conversations or events, between the main character and his environment or everything around him. And pretty much there's no voices or any characters in them per se. It's really just text with some type of moody or type of music in the background that's done by Nobuo Uematsu. But Sakaguchi was the guy who wrote the actual dreams. I remember listening to a podcast on the Warzone, and they were talking about how Sakaguchi wrote these out, and he really knows how to make a Japanese RPG. This, to him, I remember one of the quotes they were saying that for Sakaguchi, this is how an old school Japanese RPG would be on a next gen console. And you could really see that from the Thousand Years of Dreams, because you're reading them and it has almost nothing pretty much to do with the main story arc. They're kind of like little side stories or fillers. But when you read them, you get so emotionally attached to what's going on in those stories, even though there's no dialogue per se, or no actual character voices and stuff. It's just music and you reading them. You could really get engaged onto what's going on and really really kind of get engrossed in the entire world that Lost Odyssey is trying to set up for you. And it's really an emotional kind of like roller coaster for that matter. So I really recommend that you guys check out this game. There's just so much content and so much stuff in there. I will admit the game is pretty damn hard, especially if you're not really into old school Japanese RPGs. This one might take you a while, or you might not like it altogether, so it might be best to stay away. But at least at one point, I recommend that anybody that's an RPG fan or wants to get into the RPG genre should definitely pick up this game, because this is a must play for any RPG fan. I don't care who you are, if you're a fan of Final Fantasy or Mass Effect or Fallout, whatever it may be, this is an RPG you guys definitely need to check out. So anyway, that's just my thoughts, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys get the opportunity to check out this game. Leave your comments and video responses. I don't mind. Just keep it civil. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Venomous is out, and that was only the goddamn truth, people. Talk to y'all later.